Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti for Unbiased Conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. So, our big news story of the week, Ralph, has nothing to do with those four promotions that I just mentioned. In fact, it is NWA. So, on this past episode of NWA Power, Jim Cornette is trying to make a commentary joke with Trevor Murdoch, and the joke did not go over well with some fans, saying it was racist, wanted his job, people saying he should be fired from NWA. NWA sees this. Dave Lagana edits out the clip. He takes the video off YouTube, puts it back on YouTube without the comment, and the next day, Jim Cornette resigns from NWA. So a lot of people are happy about that. On Friday, he does talk about it on his episode of the Jim Cornette Experience podcast, explains how the joke was not intended to be racist. It was supposed to be a starvation joke. And he eventually apologized after 35 minutes of talking about it, eventually says that he apologized to anybody that thought it was offended. However, if you were one of those that just were looking to find something and cry about it, F you. Yeah. So it's as close to an apology you're going to get from Jim Cornette. What are your thoughts on this whole thing with Jim Cornette and the comment and whatnot?
Well, he's in a tough position because he has certainly, called out quite a large majority of the current wrestling fan base, right? Mm-hmm. So for those who are diehard AEW fans, for those who like Joey Ryan, for those who are into the more indie scene, there's probably a really, really good chance you don't have a favorable opinion about Jim Cornette.
Right.
So he's going to have a target on his back. And I think that fan base was clamoring for him to make one misstep or one comment that can be, explained in a different light or manner than the way he may have intended it. And that's essentially what this was. Now, I think that the comment itself, certainly something that's probably ill-advised in today's society, just whether he meant it as a starvation joke, which, I'm not even sure that justifies it. It's just because he said in his podcast, starvation is funny. And Richard Pryor said this and that. And
Sam Kinison and
people have said certain things in the past. And when you look back on them, like into today's society, you're just like, you kind of cringe a little bit. Yeah. So, whether he meant it as a racist joke or whether he meant it as a starvation joke, like Brian Last said, who is his co-host, even challenged him on. He said it's ill-advised. It's a stupid joke. It's especially stupid to say, especially in today's society. So to think that nobody was going to be offended by this, whether he meant it as a racist joke or not, I can't understand him actually thinking that. I know he said this in the past. He said this, I think, in the 80s and several other times.
He said it numerous times. So
right.
Back in
so it's not like this is new. Right. A new comment.
Back in 1986, he said that joke when talking about Big Bubba Rogers, who many would know as the Big Boss Man. Mm-hmm. And then in 1995, he said about Lawrence Taylor and their push for WrestleMania 11. He's like, Lawrence Taylor needs to do something impressive. And that was one of the things he mentioned. So obviously, it's a stupid joke.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's in poor taste. Obviously, it's ill-advised. I'm not protecting that. I'm not defending that. It's a stupid-ass joke. I will say, though, there are definitely things that were said, 20, 30, hell, even 5 years ago that was said. And today, it just cannot fly by.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, and I was thinking of like different situations in comedy where people loved it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, would this work in 2019?
It probably wouldn't.
And there's three examples that came to mind with this. Number one was on Saturday Night Live, Eddie Murphy did a segment called White Like Me, which was a joke on the book Black Like Me. And I was like, would this work in 2019? Another one was the character Miss Swan from Mad TV. For those that don't know, it was Alex Borstein, who is the voice of Lois Griffin on Family Guy, where she acted like an old Asian woman. And she, it was a very stereotypical old Asian woman that really didn't know what was going on and would just repeat herself over and over, not understand the English language, just be like, oh, okay. And the other one was Dave Chappelle's racial draft. So those three things, I'm like, if they did that today, would it be acceptable? And would people be like, oh, Dave Chappelle should get fired. Alex Borstein should get fired. Eddie Murphy should get fired.
Well, and that's part of the problem. Like, I think in today's society, certainly, I think politics certainly have a large influence over how people are going to react or interpret things. And certainly, you know, when it comes to race, people are going to be sensitive of that. So in today's climate with the way government is and the way politics are, you know, right now we're kind of a very divided country.
Yes.
So for him to say something like that, definitely ill-advised. Now, there are definitely people out there who are trying to silence, you know, certain messages and things like that. Like, for example, comedy. For a good majority of however long comedy's been around, joking about certain things, it's not meant to be taken seriously. One of the guys, I think his name's Bill Burr. He's somebody that, you know, leftists really hate because he says a lot of controversial things.
Yeah.
Now, is that right or wrong? I'm not really one to decide, but I don't think anybody should be able to just call for somebody's job because they don't agree with somebody's saying.
Right.
Now, Cornette's issue aside, because that's different. Now, if you're saying that Jim Cornette should be fired because he made fun of Joey Ryan, well, no, I'm sorry. Like, grow the up. He has a different opinion than you. If he criticized AEW, much like I have, and people were commenting, oh, well, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. Like, no, my opinion is different than yours. I respect your opinion. You should respect mine. If you're going to say that Jim Cornette or anyone else for that matter should be fired because they just don't share the same opinion on wrestling itself,
right?
Go fuck yourself. In plain English, like, I'm sorry. Just because you went to an indie show or whatever, you think that, you know, you're some guru of professional wrestling and, oh, you just don't get it, Ralph. No, I get it. The guy's flipping somebody with his dick. It's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
So that stuff aside, or all of that stuff aside, like, it's just, he's got a target on his back because he has criticized these people. Right. He has said things, especially about AEW and stuff like that. So they were just waiting for his one misstep, and he gave it to him because it was this very stupid, ill-advised comment.
It was obviously stupid, regardless if it was racist or a starvation joke or whatever. But like Jim Cornette, you see this all over in society where controversial characters, people are going to look for things that they say to get them in trouble. In politics, it's Donald Trump. On radio, it's Howard Stern. In wrestling, it's Jim Cornette. So he said something stupid, and you know, give kudos to Jim Cornette on this. He's saying, you know, I don't want to be a part of a company where every time I say something and people cry about it, they're going to apologize and say that he did this wrong. It's not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
It's not fun for NWA. It's not fun for the wrestlers involved. It's not fun for Cornette. It's not fun for the fans. So you know what? He took the higher road as best as he could and walked away.
Yeah.
It's not like he needs the job. He's got a lot of money. He's got all his collectibles. He's got his podcast. He doesn't need this. Yep. He's only doing this 2 days a month. So let him just go away. Just go away. People will be happy.
Continue to do the podcast, trying to troll those who don't agree with him. And
yes,
you know, rightfully so. They get in a big uproar every time he comments on something that they don't agree with.
Right.
And that's going to make him money. You know, so what does he care? So, you know, at the end of the day, was it an ill-advised comment? Shouldn't have said it. There's no place for it in today's society to even think that that would even fly in today's society. I don't know why he would assume that. You know, there were, and, you know, we don't really want to get into too much of this, but things have happened in the past when you look at just society and you look at just the history of the world. Doesn't make things okay. Like, you look back on certain things that happened in the United States and you're like, that should have never happened.
Right.
So him saying, oh, well, I said that in the 80s and nobody complained about it. But yeah, we've grown as a society and we've grown as people to become more accepting. So you can't say things like that, especially in today's world. So there's no place for it. He resigned or got fired or whatever. Whatever ended up happening. He's not working there anymore. So
move on. So I'm actually interested to see if there is actually an increase or decrease in the total views for this episode of Power this week because of Jim Cornette leaving.
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people out there that said they just refused to watch the show because he was still on the show. But there's some people that are like, he's the only good thing on this show.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I guess supposedly, from what some people have said in standing up for Jim Cornette, they say that he's one of the more sought after minds in professional wrestling. So people can criticize him, and that's one of the big things. Oh, he's old and he's out of touch. He's this, he's that. It's like, but he's actually drawn money. Like, he's been successful in the wrestling industry. And does that mean like his outlook on professional wrestling right now is out of touch? It might be, but at least he can say he's done something in the professional wrestling world.
Right. And let's not forget, Tony Khan did want Jim Cornette involved in AEW. It's just that Jim Cornette knew who he was getting involved with and just was like, no, absolutely not. But unfortunately, we'll never get Jim Cornette in AEW because that would probably be an interesting storyline. Him bringing in a tag team against the Young Bucks
anytime soon. I don't think he'd make it out of the arena live.
No, but let's move on to another big story that's happening outside of the four promotions that we usually talk about, and that is Ring of Honor. So this past Tuesday, we did another round of the All Elite Wrestling Draft, and one of the people that we brought up was Kelly Klein, as her contract was supposed to be up. Well, now it's up.
Yeah,
but she got fired from Ring of Honor. Not by a formal conversation, not by phone, by email. And the email basically said that she violated some term in her contract where she exposed backstage information. And they're like, yeah, we're just going to let you stay home for 6 months and not renew your contract. So you're done with Ring of Honor. And she's the Ring of Honor Women's Champion, or the Women of Honor Champion. She's been on Twitter very actively since this happened, talking about how Ring of Honor doesn't have a concussion policy, which is part of the reason why she hasn't been wrestling. She's having post-concussion syndrome. And, a lot of people are going up to bat with her. There's several wrestlers that talked to Newsweek talking about the situation and how there's no concussion protocol, but Ring of Honor saying, no, there's actually been one since 2016. And, the more news that we get about Ring of Honor, the worse shape that they're getting.
Yeah.
We already knew they're in bad shape because of stars leaving, but now you have this Ring of Honor. Like, when is it a point where Sinclair's just like, we got to get out of this, even if we lose money?
I don't know if they're making money. I don't know if they're making money.
Saying.
Like how could they possibly, at this point, if you don't have stars, I mean, yeah, they're putting on shows, they have weekly TV, but it's not like you can point to them and say they're the third biggest company, fourth biggest. I mean, they're kind of like, when people talk about professional wrestling, I hear people talk about MLW. Hear them talk about NWA Power, AEW, of course, WWE, NXT. I never hear, unless it's something bad or talent leaving over the last 6 months to a year, I don't recall anybody saying anything good about anything Ring of Honor has done. I guess the biggest thing would be maybe Villain Enterprises.
Yeah.
And supposedly Marty Scurll is already out the door. It reminds me of, you ever see the memes online where it's like, something happens and the guy's like, hold my beer.
Yeah.
It's kind of like WWE has some shitty booking and then here comes Ring of Honor. It's like, hold my beer. Cause it's like every week they're in the news for the wrong reasons. And this is probably as bad as it's going to get for them, because when it comes to concussions, again, we just talked about in today's society, like helmet to helmet hits aren't going to come back to the NFL just because it doesn't make fucking sense after all the research that's been done. So to see that they could potentially not be taking injury seriously, especially if it's a concussion, that's disheartening. And to see, also, I think Triple H made comments about this, more specifically about talent within WWE, but about airing your dirty laundry out over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they didn't even have the professionalism to call her in, knowing she's the women's champion, and let her know that she was what they were going to be doing, and just emailed her, that's just shitty practice.
Yeah.
That's not something you do. That's not something that you should be doing, especially if it's one of your top talent.
Right.
So, I mean, there's multiple things going on here, not just the fact that she's hurt and not able to work.
Right. No, of course. And I mean, I've been fired a couple times, and most of the time it was, when I was fired face to face. You just do it that way. It's just not even like proper business protocol or whatever. It's just common decency.
Yeah.
Email?
Well, here's the thing.
Like teenagers break up with their girlfriend or boyfriend
through text.
Through texting and email.
Here's the problem. So she's saying that they're not necessarily taking her injuries seriously.
Right.
And there's a lack of professionalism there.
Yeah.
So them trying to say that, that's not true. We have a concussion protocol in place, and them now firing her via email only further supports her stance that they're not a professional company.
Mm-hmm.
And other wrestlers have said the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Joey Mercury came out in her support, and as others have as well.
Right.
So, I mean, usually when you hear these things, it's like there's kind of two sides to it. But if everybody's coming out in her favor and she has this stuff to back it up, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not looking good for Ring of Honor. I know that much.
I haven't yet seen one Ring of Honor person say, actually, there is a concussion protocol. Actually, these guys are top-notch guys. I love working for them. You haven't seen Jay Lethal or Matt Taven, who are, stars in the company.
Well, that's a whole nother scandal. Wasn't Jay Lethal investigated for like sexual harassment last year?
Maybe.
And Ring of Honor like covered it up. I could be wrong, but I know there was while he was the champion, something had happened with him, and there was a big dispute because supposedly management knew about it. I don't know. I'll have to go and look it up. Don't quote me. Go and look it up for yourself. Don't say like I'm reporting fake stuff. But I know there was something that happened with
Right. Right. But this is just bad. And, if you guys want to check out where we think she ends up going, because we thought she was leaving anyway, we'll link the description to the episode, and I'll put an eye above my head if you're watching on YouTube. On the All Elite Wrestling Draft, she was the 6 of 7 that we talked about on that show. But let's close out with AEW and WWE because, for all intents and purposes, we are a channel that talks primarily AEW and WWE. So last week it was announced that on January 15th in Miami, we are going to have AEW Bash at the Beach. Cody Rhodes did whatever work that he had to do to get the trademark Bash at the Beach. Once it was announced, though, there were rumors circulating that, in fact, Cody Rhodes did not get the trademark, or WWE is challenging the trademark, and they're going to court about this because at one point, WWE had the copyright. When they bought WCW, that was one of the things that they had was the trademark Bash at the Beach. They renewed it in 2006. They renewed it in 2011. Apparently, they did not renew it when it was available in 2016. And Cody's like, I got to get this. So he filed for it. He got it. We have Bash at the Beach. And then Wednesday, when the only comment that Cody's made about it so far was there was a sign at Dynamite that said, "Suck it, Vince." He's like, I don't need to say more than that sign right there, and walked out. So, I mean, from what I understand, WWE owns the trademark for the words "the Bash,"
right?
But not Bash at the Beach. Could this be a very messy situation, or is this just typical practice for WWE because it's something they used to have? They're just challenging something they used to have, and they just want to protect what they already have.
So this goes back to the discussion we had maybe a year ago when we were talking about this thing being an actual competition and there being different types of competition between companies. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's the in-ring competition. Yes, there's the ratings. There's also contracts and stuff like that, competing for different talent. And then this is just another level of competition where, if it comes down to it, yes, of course, WWE is going to challenge that. I think the last thing that WWE would want for AEW to have is a name as, I guess, if you want to say as noticeable or as recognized as Bash at the Beach, because that was one of the bigger, more recognizable pay-per-views that WCW used to do. So one would think that if AEW was running Bash at the Beach, that's going to attract, even if it's a small percentage of the former WCW lapsed fan, right? So it's eye-catching at the very least. The fact that WWE is challenging that doesn't surprise me because if they tie that up in litigation, it can really actually come down to WWE has a lot of money and can pay a lot of lawyers to tie this up in litigation. And, is it ethical? I don't know. I guess it depends on what your view of ethics truly are, but it's still business. And that's the thing. Like, people just look at professional wrestling as, oh, they had really good matches. It's still a business. It's still about money. It's still about competing for viewership and all that type of stuff and stuff that happens behind closed doors, protecting your company. So it doesn't surprise me that WWE is trying to protect the name The Bash at the Beach and prevent a rival company from having that pay-per-view name. At the very slightest, it doesn't surprise me at all.
No, I mean, they own the name from when they bought WCW. So obviously the stuff on the WWE network, those previous, those pay-per-views that WCW had of Bash at the Beach, what happens to them if AEW buys a trademark? Does WWE have to pay AEW to use those pay-per-views because that has the name in it? And that's something that might need to be considered in court. And that might be the only reason why they're going to court, is to say, okay, we still want these pay-per-views on the network. Do we have to give you any compensation for it? Does the court decide that? At the end of the day, it's cool that they're bringing back Bash at the Beach, and, they're doing a version of Battle Bowl and things that Dusty Rhodes created. And it seems like the Match Beyond is another trademark that Cody got, which is similar to War Games. So it's just where Cody is just taking things that Dusty Rhodes created and are available as trademarks, and he's going after them. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with what Cody's doing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with WWE doing, because they owned the trademark at one point. They don't have it anymore, so what are we going to do about it? Yeah. They're not just going to let them take it.
No, why would they do that? That doesn't make any type of sense.
Right. So, but I'm excited for it. They're going to have this show in Miami, and then they're going to do a show on the Jericho Cruise, all part of Bash at the Beach. So it should be a fun one. So let us know what you think of everything that we talked about today with Jim Cornette, with Kelly Klein and Ring of Honor, with this whole thing between WWE and AEW for Bash at the Beach, in the comments below. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, SCPB Podcast. And for the best conversations in AEW, WWE, NXT, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.